Okay, it's showing officially 5 p.m. on Frank's phone, so we use that. First things first, I'd ask everybody here, silence your ringers on your phone so if it goes off. We are call to order. Roll call the airport board. I've done already by visual identification. We've got Brian Curry participating by Zoom. Brian, are you there?
I don't see him yet.
We'll come back to him.
Okay.
We do have two, excuse the absence, Steve Anderson, Dolphin Gomez, and Dick McCann, likewise. Otherwise, we've got Mike Crosby, myself, Tim Conrad, Larry Odell, Ross Schauhauer, and Lisa Ailport, our lieutenants. So we're ready to go to item 2, pledge of allegiance. Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. One nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The 3 calls for conflicts of interest. The item 4 changes to the agenda. I don't have any changes. I don't know if anybody else does. I do have one quick item on the packet tonight that the board members received. I asked Jonathan to include some documents that we were given last year when we formed a new board, and since we've got some new members, I thought it would be instructive to have these. First one was a little blurb off the internet and county's website about the board and tells you exactly what the primary goals are for the board. Second is a 1-page advisory board guidelines, and I talked some about public meeting laws, things like that. The third is, again, Clinton County Advisory Board guidelines, and these were passed officially by the Board of County Commissioners last year. And I wanted to include them because we talked about bylaws, and I couldn't remember we actually seen the bylaws. These serve as a bylaw. Should have these for quick reference. If I haven't read through them before, I'd recommend you take time to sit down and go through them. Probably fun as we do it. And with that, I'll move to item 5, public comment. Anybody in the audience have anything to say?
Are you going to have another one at the end?
Yeah, we've got public comment working. Okay, we're going to move on to item 6, approve minutes of the previous meeting. All in favor of approving minutes of the previous meeting, say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. We still have Brian still absent.
Brian is online.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any way he can communicate with us?
He can put something into the chat and let us know that he's available. Yeah, we like to keep everybody online muted.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't know what the procedure should be as far as him voting in the. I don't know, is there any way you can ask him if you'd like to vote on that? Brian.
I sent you text approving of the meeting minutes from the last meeting.
Perfect. Okay, moving on to staff reports and updates. We'll have a report from Ardura and progress on those projects.
Here.
Getting put on the hot seat.
I'm Grace Vickers with Ardura. If you would prefer, I can just go through just the changed items since the last meeting, if that works best. Probably.
This is Lisa's first meeting.
I was at the last meeting.
Oh, yeah, that's right, you did sit through the last meeting. Lisa, do you want to?
I'm
long
happy to
version or
take the
short
quick version.
Like the condensed version?
Yes.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so items that have changed since the last meeting, we closed out, AIP 48. We've submitted the final paperwork to close it out, which is a compilation of, the North Taxiway and then engineering services for several projects, one being the runway light improvement project. All of that paperwork was submitted to the FAA for acceptance by March 1st, which was a deadline to get the rank of the closed. The Portland Electrical Improvement Project, also have the final paperwork submitted to the FAA by March 1st. And our work is done on that, and the FAA will basically, accept or reject the paperwork and they'll get the final payment. The snow removal equipment building, all work is complete on that physical work. We're in the paperwork process. We issued, us and the Portland Airport issued the final completion certificate during the month of February for that project. The runway, rehab and taxiway Bravo 4 is an ongoing project where we mill and inlay the runway and constructed taxiway B4. The important things that one has been on closeout on pause. In the spring, we need to paint and install the runway lights. But the important thing about that is that the scheduled closures for runway 624 are 6 a.m. on April 22nd through opening again on the 26th of April. So it's a Monday through a Friday opening at 6 a.m. Let's see here, and I believe the contractor has all of the components and pieces to finish that project. The only issue could be is if it was raining that week, one of their main plans is to reapply paint on the entire thing. So it could be adjusted based on weather. The taxiway B project, which is pavement maintenance, we also anticipate doing the final painting of that during that same week, so the 22nd through the 26th with good weather. Let's see here. Taxiway C, it's a design project that we've been working on. It went out to bid on Tuesday of this week. Advertised for bids. We will have a pre-bid meeting next week, I think Thursday here at the airport. They'll open the bids, I think it's the 2nd of April. At the county commissioners meeting, we're hoping for a lot of interest in good bidders, and that's that. And let's see here, the South Pavement Maintenance Project, that one's on hold. I think the only other ongoing project is a wildlife hazard management plan. We have that updated wildlife hazard management plan drafted. It's in review internally. We're expected to give it to the airport, I think, by the 1st of. Did I skip over anything? We're having some server issues at night. We're taking it out on an old form. So it's mostly memory. We're having a couple issues in our office. We're unable to get through it.
I do have one quick question on the runway 624 rehab project. Both runways closed on the 24th, that's city, both 220 and 64 will close. Is that one day?
Is that a Thursday? Yeah. Yes.
So the airport will be affected.
Essentially, it's for the work that's in that 2024 threshold. Might replace
I guess this is where you find out if people read those, depending on how many people drive past.
We talk about that date, what did you? On board.
April 24th.
April. After.
I thought it was Thursday.
Well,
25th is April, the Thursday.
Thursday's the 25th,
24th is
is Wednesday.
Yeah. Take your day off there.
Right.
So what day is
That's it?
it? What's the,
April 25th. April 25, but for, okay, thank you.
And 64.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Frank.
Move on to, reports and updates from the AP Airport Director.
Want to give you guys a quick update on our temporary tower. We are still moving along with that project. We should be starting to move dirt next week if we can get a few days of sunshine here to dry it out up north a little bit. The container boxes will start arriving over the next week or so. We're going to start doing the fab work, get all the windows and everything cut in. So we're still shooting for May 1st to have it complete. Tower Tech is going to bring their trailer up here, just in case it's not finished, just if they need to operate out of it for a couple of weeks, and we'll finish up the tower, and then they'll move into that. So one of the big dates to remember is April 10th. They are going to be in town, bringing the trailer, actually leaving here, but they want to hold a pre-season pilot meeting, essentially an interface meeting. That is the same date that y'all have a advisory board meeting on. So speaking with Frank, with everyone's permission, we'd like to make that one of the main topics of that meeting, essentially. I know the FAA wants to have some inbuilt pricing bids to show up at the meeting. They're trying to invite everyone regionally, so there's a chance that we can have a pretty big turnout for the meeting. So we were, with your permission, we would like to move the location downtown to our meeting in Blaine where the commission meetings happen. They have audio visual speakers, seating for 100 people or so. So I think it'd be pretty important to get us moved down there for that. It's pretty much just going to be an interface meeting, a chance to meet and greet Tower Tech, the controllers, talk about what worked over the last few years, what didn't work over the last few years, what would we like to see, challenges, just kind of get everyone up to speed with the tower before they actually flip the switch. Give them a month after that to work through some of those issues and try and accommodate the best they can. So it's just a chance for all of us to do a meet and greet with them. So that'll be April 10th.
Everybody good with moving the next month's meeting down to council chambers at the county courthouse?
Same time.
Same time.
Yep, same time.
Be 5 in the afternoon. Yeah. Oh, good, yeah.
Yeah, I think it'd be a great opportunity to get to meet those guys and see who's actually going to be working on it. So,
I'm sorry.
How about a motion and a vote?
Yeah.
It's not agenda.
You want to make the motion? Second.
What's the motion?
Any voting member can second the motion.
It doesn't cost anything.
No, I know, I just concerned that agenda is.
All in favor of changing the venue of the institute meeting for the court office, the council chambers and the county courthouse, say aye. Any opposed? Brian, good with that?
I asked what's the motion. I didn't quite hear it stated.
Okay. The motion is to change the venue of next month's meeting scheduled for April 10th from the airport office to council chambers at the county courthouse.
I favor that. Yay.
Very good. It's unanimous.
Before you go on, Frank, Brian has a question for Gaston. Did you want to state that or do you want me to read it, Brian?
I think it'd be better if you read it for the clarity of the audience. Just
Okay.
audio might not be coming through well.
So Brian's question is for Gaston, what's the status of developing pilot guidelines for navigating in the airspace around COE to minimize air traffic disturbance in the community?
essentially, that's going to be a big part of this. That's most of this meeting will be a briefing on arrivals and departures into the corridor here. So that's going to be a big piece of it. I know we're going to be upgrading. We're doing a big update to our website, adding a whole noise abatement section to that. So we're going to have some nice graphics and stuff. that'll all be approved, everything's gonna come before, and it's kind of a big process as far as building those routes, but yes, that will be definitely a piece to, this meeting that we'll be bringing forward.
Thank you.
I know at the last meeting, Dick Rattan had some questions on the airport master plan update process. I just kind of wanted to run through that real quick, just give you a quick status of where we're at with that. We are definitely in need of an update. We've exceeded most parameters in our current master plan early, much earlier than expected. We're still planning on initiating that process this fall. So I think one of his questions were, what's the involvement of the advisory board community in that process? And it's a big, you guys will be directly involved with both steps in that. There's going to be a multitude of community outreach meetings. It's a pretty long and in-depth process that the advisory board will have a large part. So I'll keep you guys tuned on what we're looking like on timeline on that, but it has to do with FAA funding and what we're looking at. This is a pretty big update. It'll probably be one of the biggest ones we've done at the airport, just because we're in that transitional period of growth right now. So that's kind of what we're shooting for at the end of this year for the update.
Yes, a quick question. Do you have any action items for the advisory board before this process is initiated this fall, other than being familiar with the current plan, reviewing it?
Yeah, I would just say become as familiar with the current plan as possible. There's a lot of good information in there. A lot of that information will carry over into the new update, but there's going to be a lot of new elements that will be added to the update. One of the big one being the noise abatement and community outreach side of it, future development, future configurations. It's an opportunity for us to really look at the roadmap for the next 10 years. Anything we want to change as far as fleet mix, direction of the airport, how we want to see it built out, different types of users and stuff. So it's a pretty big undertaking.
Mr. Chairman, could I ask a question?
Yeah, Maria.
Where would one find that plan? Is it on the website?
It is on the website, yes, and I can also suggest their copy as well. Last item here, hangar development. I've been over the last couple of weeks really trying to dig into different areas on the airport where we can fit singular hangars, different places we can build out that are not constructed yet. What are some areas that are going to be future development where we can open up, like say Delta 3 or across, north of the Gun Club property. Really trying to nail down places to put hangars now. Our wait list is creeping up on almost 50 people now to build hangars here. So we've been really working through that list. We're starting to call, trying to get it categorized into different users. I think that was just adding different filters to it. There's some people on the list that are only interested in building a multi-unit hangar, kind of like Huckleberry hangars. And there's people that just want 50 by 50. And then there's ones that want 100 by 100. So there's different uses. There's a few just rotor guys that want helicopter access. So just trying to nail down all different places on the airport we can fit these different types of users to start working through the list. So I'm working with our engineers for just trying to put together a whole map that we can you guys to show all the different locations that we've dug up that we can add some development to. We'll start to work through the list and get some hangars built before opening up new taxiways and stuff. I've identified at least 8 different places we could build hangars right now without building taxiways. So we'll present those to you guys shortly.
A question regarding that. So you mentioned that there's like a 50-person waiting list for hangars, and we'll probably never be able to supply all the hangars that wants here.
Correct.
But what based on your estimate of what's possible right now, how many of those 50 can be satisfied? Do you think you can come up with more than 50 hangar spaces?
If we can get certain development open, like our first phase of like Delta 3, we could probably get into about 25 to 30 of those satisfied. One One thing to consider too is that list is fairly old. There's applicants on there all the way back to 2019, 2020. That as we weed through it, there's quite a few of them that are like, hey, we've already rented another hangar. We're not in a position to build. Not that that removes them from the list. It moves on to the next person. So when you look at a 50-person list, how many people are actually cash ready to build a hangar? We're probably looking at 25 to 30 people at this point. So
That could include some options for perhaps an airport owned hangars.
possibly, yes, that's definitely one thing that at least T hangars are like consecutive hangars. We need to definitely look at our fleet mix on what is the market allowing right now? Are people looking for more T hangars or condo style hangars? Are they looking for the larger 60 by 60, 60 by 80 hangars? What is our, we don't want to become too saturated with one, like if we have a ton of T hangars, but people are wanting bigger suites and stuff. So it's kind of working through that right now.
Have you reached out to the folks on that list to see what their current interest is? Relative to what perhaps they signed up for in the first place?
Yes, yeah, there's actually quite a few of them that did. I mean, even changed a few years they've been on the list. So the bigger stuff are not quite as big for a smaller thing, vice versa. So that's kind of what we're working on developing, working through the list, and this having these few spots open up around the airport is really giving us the opportunity to really weed through that and get that new list published. So they'll help us out with that.
I have another question regarding that. How many county-owned hangars are there in the inventory?
We just have the fourplex of T hangars and then the old resort county hangar that's not occupied. It's not constructed itself. So essentially just the 14 hangars. Over by OSTAR. The last thing I had was next week we will be visited by the FAA. They're going to conduct our 139 cert inspection. So it's our normal annual inspection for the FAA. We're well prepared for it. Everything is looking good for that. If you see more NOTAMs than usual, that has to do with that, just matching NOTAMs with work orders and work to be completed with nicer weather, essentially. So we can't paint in the winter time, but we can do certain work in the winter time. So as long as we show that we have work orders out for those items, then we're good. We can finally start addressing them here this next week. But we'll forward that report to the board as soon as we get that.
Thank you,
Mr. Chair,
Sir.
we are going to be asking the ask.
Oh, the question for the applicant? We're good.
What's the status of it? I'm calling to make this, but I've always tried to do it. Not all. I'll take four pipes.
So there's been an issue with the gate soil work at the power station, but let's see what the communication our readers to the power station. I believe we're looking at changing out the radio on that because it's taking multiple swipes and multiple features to get the
You're talking about gate 16?
16 and 15.
16, the cars work fine, but when I enter the code outside, sometimes I have to do that multiple times. And I remember Gaston talking about the back and forth with the fire station, and of course, I figured that wasn't the issue with it, but I did have one day I couldn't get into the house, I haven't gave it that code, no matter what I did.
Yeah, it's definitely something we're working on right now. It seems to be affecting almost all the gates. So if you are having an issue getting in, just try it a couple more times.
I think the last time I went through 16, it took me 3 or 4. It's fun.
I read the gate 16 as you know, airport access. Yeah, well, there's a couple of them. So let me just clarify, it is an RF link. So if there's interference on the band, anything else that might be causing a problem with the integrity of that RF signal, it's got to interrogate and go back and forth and get authorization when the gate opens. So you have an interference problem on the right or
But if you had a problem with your card,
Yeah, it's the card.
yes, they're all the same.
Oddly enough, the cars were flashing every time it's been told.
It's all the same, but I'm thinking that my director. And the gate doesn't open out the back up. They find a different gate. Sorry.
Well, if you call the ops, they're pretty quick. Anybody else? We'll open up. Anybody else have a question? Yes. Okay, we'll move on. It's one and only Gary Crowley Auto with the Coeur d'Alene Airport Association update.
Okay, I wanna throw a disclaimer out here. I didn't draw this picture. So I have nothing to do with it. It was, done back in 2012. And it's a pavilion that, they came up with at that time. We did, part of the Coeur d'Alene Airport Association, we did earmark some money for this, but probably not enough. So this is kind of what our rendition was for a pavilion out somewhere on the airport. It didn't take any, it didn't happen in the last, since 2012. And so we were thinking maybe we'd present it again and see if it would be an option at this time for a viewing and or pilot lounge type place.
Gary, can I interrupt you?
Sure.
We do have as a business item B airport viewing stand. If you, I think it would be best if we defer discussing this, when we get to that point, because then they're gonna open up
Sure.
discussion of it.
Yeah.
But I think Yasin had some input on that.
Okay. Well, the Coeur d'Alene Airport Association had a great meeting last night. We had one of our members get a 50-year award from the FAA. The FAA came over, and so that was good. And then we had a presentation by Dale Giboney, yeah, Giboney, and he's the candidate for county commissioner. So he gave us ideas about how that he, thought the county ought to be run. And then we had some other things. We talked about a pilot group that would get together, and Mike Kincaid put on a great presentation about flight patterns and stuff like that around the airport, how you're supposed to enter the flight patterns and so on and so forth. And that brought up the thing about noise abatement and also fly friendly type deal. So that might address some of the other issues that we have. And I think that was about it. So that's all I have.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to item 9 business. First item, this is really a bit of old business. Last year when we calculated the annual fee increase, we applied to those leases, new leases, or those leases up for rate renewal. There were some issues around how steep the hike it was, so we decided at that point in time we revisited the idea of changing how we calculated that. Given that the rules and standards contain a myriad of ways, a myriad of considerations in calculating that increase, we decided we really should just settle on one index and get some research on. We found an index that we all felt was appropriate in this area. And we perhaps consider going to a 5-year average first, so that we don't get the big up and down one year to the next, so that some leaseholders feel like they won the lottery. Some feel like they got punished. So we had a meeting earlier this week, asked Ken to pull the numbers together. We have an item of tactics tonight that shows the indices going back several years and what a 5-year average would produce if we were to go to that, and eliminate all the other considerations, some of which were what they were charging, things of that nature. Just go ahead straight from CPI, use a 5-year average based on the Western BC index. And so, yeah, they're yeah,
I got the email, but it says. Anybody needs it, you didn't get the email, it's here.
There's more on the podium also.
Anyway, we wanted to review this, stack hands on it, and give the green light to go to the commissioners and change that portion of the rules and standards for this methodology. And so that way would be a straight calculation. It would do every year, we would review it, approve it, send it on. And we had more or less agreed to do it last year, but it got to the left in the wake of a lot of other things we got going on.
Do I have a comment on that? So that's included in the rules and standards, and then we just finished the review of the rules and standards, make some suggestions going forward with amendments to the rules and standards. So I just wondered, where are we at on, because that'll be inclusive of the changes that
We're
we made.
just finishing the red line version of that to present that to the board.
But, you know, given the timeline it's taken us to do the rules and standards, I was concerned that we got up to the deadline, so having this fee increase calculated and approved, that we needed to more or less jump the schedule with this and make sure that regardless of when we finish the rules and standards, this is already included, so that leaseholders will know what the increase is gonna be within the.
Well, I think we've gone over this. And make a motion to accept that methodology.
Well, is there any more discussion on it? You know, Ross, you know, this, Larry, or Lisa?
I think somebody's got to second the motion, then you open it for discussion there, Chairman. But-
Okay, someone want to make a motion that we adopt 5-year average? Yeah, I didn't say I was gonna be any good.
I think Mike made the motion. It's just somebody's got to second it. And then you open it to discussion.
Why second? Okay, sure. Now we open it for discussion? Very good. Open for discussion.
So on that, this is a 5-year average. Is that what you're saying? Take a 5-year of the CPI for all urban consumers in this, in the west, in the CPI West.
Kim can give some explanation as to exactly what demographic that represents.
Sure.
Yeah, so last year, as Frank said, it was definitely decided to use the West BC class size. So on page 2 of your handout, the West region includes the Mountain and the Pacific divisions. Idaho is in the Mountain division. And then the class BC is population size of 2.5 million or less. So that was definitely decided. And then we went with the calculation that I had last year that it didn't use the annual numbers. It used a January to January. So the discussion was had about moving to the West region, BC, and using those annual figures with a 5-year average. And so that's what this document is based off.
Great. That answers the questions I had. And it, as you recall, there was like this anomaly, the way that they described it in the airport guidelines about what CPI you should be using, and that got fixed last year, I think. And so you're proceeding accordingly with that fix, and I concur. And I also concur with the 5-year average. I think that smooths things out so that people who are leasing don't have unpleasant surprises in one year that might be an extreme year for inflation versus another. So I think it evens out the curve of adjustments for those who are in the leasing community. So, you know, I generally think that these changes are reasonable.
How did we come to use the West from?
So actually, when we reviewed it last year, the Mountain includes Arizona, Colorado, Idaho, Montana, Nevada, New Mexico, Utah, and Wyoming. And it actually for the most part, created a CPI that was higher than the inclusion of the Pacific region with that, or the Pacific division in there. Um,
So I'd like to
Yeah.
get a discussion forward more volatile.
right.
So and the rules and standards, I think they specified it Northwest CPI, and that doesn't even exist. You know, and I think the intention with the rules and standards was to regionalize CPI, but we felt like going to the VNC and it was more stable. And it represented basically the Western United States, which is, you know, really we're part of it. Even though there are pieces of it are fairly isolated, by restricting it to populations of 2.5 million or less, we got a state of 200 people. You know, that really made more sense. That's really the market, as opposed to just the entire state. So I think that's why we don't have this. Yeah. We thought that was a little fair application. Seemed to be a little bit more realistic in terms of possibly.
Two things there, Chairman, if I could, I agree with, the staff's assessment about, mountain division would actually, you wouldn't want to see what that adjustment is because it's generally higher, in terms of, the CPI. So I concur with what, staff was saying. And two, I think, Mike, I don't want to speak out of turn here, but I think as part of the review, your subcommittee's review of like the rules and standards, of which the annual lease adjustments, part of those rules and standards, you guys were going to look at something related to that. I can't remember the thread of the conversation where it led off, but I thought you were headed in that direction where we're going to seek input from the board as to possibly future changes to that, recommending changes. Maybe I'm looking at you and you're looking puzzled by that. So maybe I'm misremembering.
No, our approach was very basic. We just wanted to smooth things out and tie it to a CPI, which was relevant to this area.
Right.
It's not written into the rules. So it's our, but the suggestions are, it's a review.
And I know in the course of board meetings, when we looked at the other methodologies laid out in the rules and standards, it really didn't make a lot of sense. It would be paralysis by analysis, trying to calculate a rate increase, strictly look at the CPI, and then we see what's being charged in other fields, and then we have real estate appraisers tell us what the property out here is worth to the like. It would be an endless process. CPI is used for so many cost escalations, which makes complete sense. A band and all those other outline revenues. Big paragraph, limited generality, never should have been in the first.
So maybe we should report this.
Yeah, let's pick a CPI. Let's pick one that makes sense for this region. Let's average it out over a number of years. You know, somebody could come and say, well, it should be a 3-year average, which is twice. Everybody's going to have an opinion on it, but I think everybody agreed that 5 years seem to be the fairest and produce the most uniform increases over a period of time instead of, 1 year hanger over A, looks at a 9% increase, and next year hanger over B gets a 3% increase. We wanted that to be just more gradient rather than a series of cliffs and valleys, which is what it has been. The rates are adjusted.
And that's why we selected that time period.
And then you got that too. So it just seemed to be very logical to go ahead and kind of silence the debate. It comes up every time we deal with this. Say, okay, here's a method that's everybody agrees fair, and we will apply it consistently. So this year, that would give us what we say. Go ahead and give us a percentage increase. We can see this year.
So this year it'd be 4.32%.
Versus if we just use the CPI.
Last year was 6%.
Well, right, I'm saying 2023.
2021. 2022 was over 8%.
It was,
CPI.
the one that we used was 7.46, I believe. Yeah, is what our resolution was.
My comment was this, we didn't go for why, just have it all work. All would be based.
Yeah.
And they're gonna go away, so.
Yeah, once it's been increased, you should have to get. And I think it shows, CPI based on annual SBC is 4.2077, which would be 4.21%. This comes out at 4.31.
Mhm. There's 3.2 rounded.
You know,
Mhm.
but I would say, in my opinion, it's a fair percentage increase.
And I had two questions. One, just a matter of understanding the procedure here. Is this something that the board does each year at this time?
Yeah, there's an annual increase, we review it, and usually what happens is if the increase is overly steep, there will be some discussion on how to mitigate it, back it off a little bit. We don't have authority to set the increase, we just send a resolution on to the OCC, they decide if they want that or some other percent.
And my next question was related to process at the board's level. Given the fact that this is under 5%, won't require a public hearing, is it an action by vote of the board, or will they still hold a public hearing since it's under 5%?
There's no need for a public hearing, but all of the fees of the airport are reviewed once a year. So this is just one component of those.
Does this go in conjunction with other fee rate increases, or is
Right.
it singular?
We've always done one resolution in the past for all the fees. I think it makes it simpler just to have the one resolution out there. We do have a separate one for sewer, but for airport fees. So ideally, some of the other ones are not up for discussion as of yet, but when we're ready and the board agrees to nailing down where all of our fees, where they would like to see them for the year, then we'll do a resolution and we'll take it to the county commissioners.
So the
to
timing
set.
on this recommendation now and the execution at the board level is how much time? Just curious, typically.
Yeah, under normal circumstances, it would be 2 to 4 weeks. But this one might take just a little bit longer. But if you agree on the CPI index for the land rent rates, then that can be set, and then any other changes that want to be made can go
And I
forth
just
at
think
that
it's good
time.
for the record to know, for the board to know that if a rate increase doesn't exceed 5%, it does require.
That is correct, yes.
So I think we were trying to get in under the wire for the next increase, which was in April. Is that correct? And so we try to get all this in order for that.
I think it's going effective at the end of June.
Correct.
And we discussed that at the meeting, the board discusses this, decides what they think the increase ought to be. Tim then, of course, with the airport incorporates in their resolution. So effectively, we're saying, hey, we think this is what it ought to be. Bruce, Leslie, and Bill. We have a different.
I just wasn't sure if they would consider this outside of maybe a typical fee increase consideration, or if they would look at this separately. That's kind of why that question is. So we could look at a 2-week time frame to see that rate increase be implemented versus 6 months, depending on how they.
In this case, it would be. Terry?
I got a question. I like the way this is set up, where I'm assuming that each year it goes by, it just takes that and rolls it into the next, average on the 5-year average plan. So if it drops off in 2019, it'll pick up another one on 2024. That's, whatever that CPI is for that year.
Increase of 5 years.
It'll be higher, but pardon me? It'll probably be higher. Yeah. But then you look at 2017 and it's already a little bit lower than the other. So it'll roll it through. My question is, when you're a leaseholder, where does that, so do we get appraised every 5 years? Is that the average?
It depends on your lease. It depends on when your lease.
And then at that point, then they say, oh, well, we're gonna raise it 4.32%. Is that how it works?
The rates are fixed 5 years at a time.
Yes.
Okay. So if you were one of those, and the last time you had a rate increase, 2019, And you're up this year, then we'll that's like 4.3% from that,
Remind me,
rate and remain there.
is that true, or would it be the flat rate per square footage? So
Yeah.
you had a 5-year
Yeah, that's the.
average, it would go.
That, yeah, that.
So it could be greater than 4.
It's my understanding it's a look back, isn't it?
Can I just clarify, please? So, yeah, so from the date that you signed your lease, you have a 5-year period where your rate stays the same. Okay, so, rate review happens every 5 years. So what we do is apply whatever CPI rate we come up with this year, that rate is applied to your current land rent. And then that becomes your new rate for the next 5 years or until your renewal period happens on your lease, right? So if you are up for a rate review or your renewal period starts after the new rates go in effect, your current land rate will be multiplied by 4.32%, and then that will be your new lease rate for the next 5 years, in theory. Is that good, Harry? Okay, good.
That answers the question.
Perfect.
Lisa, is that resonating with you? I see
I
you.
just, it's just.
A little doubt in your mind.
Well, I just, it's more or less a learning curve. I apologize. So,
For everybody else to hear too.
well, so
Yeah, you agree?
So is this for new leases or existing leases? That's one question.
It's for everything. It's for everybody who signed the lease and begun the lease here with the county. It going forward over a 5-year period. It's averaged, and then your next lease increase, it's a look back, isn't it?
Yeah, okay.
Basically,
That's
for
fine.
the CPI over the past 5 years.
I think what Greg's asking is how do you establish the new lease rate this year?
Well, no, what I'm saying is I was one of the lucky 7%.
Right. I remember
And
that.
so that actually would really help. It really is cost about $350 more per year for that lease. You don't think, well, that's not much. It goes on as still forever. So, the question is, last 5 years.
You know, we did have a discussion around that. We thought that would really,
Left that up to the commissioner.
you know, I would have to say you have to, yeah, I doubt that they would go. And we don't have authority to change. At least going forward, we can say, hey, identify the problem, fix the problem.
Right.
And the rules and standards trump my existing lease.
What's that?
The rules and standards trump my existing lease.
In terms of,
It's great.
So this rate is an increase on your existing rates.
Yeah.
Whatever you're paying now, if it comes up again, it's gonna get multiplied by.
I understand that. The lease says something different.
oh, for the annual escalation.
Well, I don't think your lease included all the other methodology
Yeah, it did.
for.
Yeah.
I don't remember finding. Well, we chose to simplify that, so I don't know how that works because I'm not an attorney and you signed the lease, and I signed the lease, and I would assume that it goes back to the lease, so.
Yeah.
There's going to be a bunch of lease bills.
I don't want to push.
Yeah.
But you're, so really what you're doing, you're modifying my lease.
Technically not,
No.
because we would have to actually do a lease addendum to modify the lease. But what we're doing is we're suggesting to the Board of Commissioners to going forward, and I see where you're coming from, because it would be all new leases, assuming they accept it. Then all new leases would have that wording contained in the lease, so it leaves a number of leases out of that. Ones that have already been entered into.
Greg, can I ask how many lease increases you've been through on your lease?
Well, it's, I'm coming up on 25 years into.
In those 25 years, anytime the lease was increased, did they use anything other than mandates?
Whatever the airport said it was.
Well, I mean, did they
No.
they didn't use any of the other methods outlined.
Because you've been here as long as I have, and it's always been a
So,
CPI.
yes, so practically speaking, you know, even though they could have very many different ways in your lease to calculate that rate increase, it's a moot issue because what they did was come right back to a variance of this. And all we're doing is we're saying, you know, rather than using an annual, we're gonna use a 5-year average and we're gonna specify this as a way to mitigate incredible increases in drugs. That's all we're doing.
And that's perfect. I just want to get more clarity.
And is this listed, this is listed as one of the options.
Yes,
It's available
Correct.
to the-
Yes.
Right, yeah, and I,
Change at least. This is already one of those.
I'd have
They can
to,
choose to select that method going forward.
right,
Okay.
As much.
yeah,
Pretty
and,
much, yeah.
and I don't, yeah, I don't know if it specifically, I have to look at the different ones.
Releases will probably get written to some of that.
Okay, so this review that we had that includes that, it will go to the Board of Commissioners and then they'll run it past their legal and then you'll get your answer.
Brian, you got anything more to say?
I think I understand the flow of this, but I have one question for Kim, just in your explaining of how these lease, adjustments are made over the years. If somebody's in an existing lease, and let's say we've got this 5-year average, that's when their lease comes up, this applies to increase the rate that their lease previously was at. Is that right? So they're in a lease, the lease comes up after 5 years, and this is a rate adjustment that applies, correct?
Correct.
Now,
And
it just, so that's cool. One thing that I had a question about though is in that interim, while they're in that 5-year lease, and you might have covered this, I just couldn't hear the quality might not have been good enough. While they're in that lease, are there annual increases during those 5 years that apply? Or is that just, once you sign the lease for 5 years, you've got a locked in rate for 5 years and then it comes up and it gets adjusted by this CPI formula?
yes, the second thing you said is the case.
Okay.
You sign a lease, and as long as the term doesn't expire before the 5-year period, then yes, your rate is locked in for 5 years until it comes up for review again. And so I've never seen an instance that since I've been here where once the CPI is applied to the current rate, that it goes above what new leases are going at. So in other words, this
Mhm.
one is if everything is accepted and we have the private ground at 0.251, a lease increases for somebody who's going to have that happen this year would not be above 0.251 cents per square foot.
So if restating, it's basically if somebody came in under a new lease and there's somebody in an existing lease, they're basically paying the same lease rate, right? There's this like fairness, so to speak, like everybody's coming along at the same rate.
No,
Is that incorrect or correct?
no. So if somebody's been here on the field for 15 years,
Mm-hmm.
they started at a certain rate, then they've only had 3 CPI adjustments to that rate, where the CPI for the rate in general for new leases and lease renewals gets adjusted every year.
Okay.
So somebody who's been on the airport for a while is typically going to pay less than what somebody that just came onto the airport is paying. But then every time the lease term ends, so your base term ends or your option term ends, then you're automatically reset to the current land rent rate. Okay, so
Okay.
if my lease expired this year, my base term or my option term, then, and I renewed, I'd be at the 0.251% if it happened after we made the adjustments, obviously.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. So everybody gets reset when the term of their lease changes.
I have a question for you. So what sets the baseline rate for a brand new lease?
This process that we're going through right now. So if somebody were to set,
What's the starting?
It's
You
been,
have to have a baseline rate someplace.
it's been building every year.
Yeah.
Every year it builds.
So if I
Every
can
year.
Repeat what I'm probably the newest person here, so. But if I can make sense of it, maybe others can too. So you charge a 0.627 or 0.251 square footage rate for building or these area, land or
Land.
building, depending on.
So if you look at our main airport fee and rate schedule, that it's reviewed, that has three different rates on it. The private use rate, which is not commercial, that's the 251 now,
Mhm.
cents per square foot annually. And then you have your commercial rate, and that's gonna be at like 31 cents.
So that's what,
And then
that's the base amount that gets
That's your
assessed to a new lease. But if I am a current lessor and I'm up for renewal, I actually have a separate rate that's based on the increment of that, percentage amount that grows. So 3.2% would be the increase, even if I was at 0.1.
Right, like
Cent?
if you were at like.
So you really have two rates. I'm just curious, like, so do we have those rates adopted so that, how do you? There's really multiple rates than being approved. It's not just the square footage rate, it's actually the percentage and the square footage.
Would have, the only way that it would get reset to the new current rate is when the term, like your master term, like if you're a 25 to 25 year lease, your lease expires, you're at the end of that 25 years when it resets to this new current rate. Other than that, it's just every 5-year review with this new 5-year.
As I recall, the baseline, let's call the baseline rates. What any new leasehold would be expected to pay, those were set, I think back in 2017, 2018, and they have been escalating from those rates since every year. So this annual increase gets applied to that rate. If you're a leaseholder, your rates are set every 5 years. So if I sign a lease here with Ken for 25 years, this year, whatever the baseline rate is, when 2.1 for this year, you know, that will be my rate for the next 5 years, and then the annual increase will be. The 5-year average will be applied to that, and 5 years, yeah, the same thing will happen until that lease expires. So there's going to be a gap between the baseline rates, which were originally established in 2017, 2018, I can't remember what it was, versus what a leaseholder has, depending on when he signed his lease and how long or how many times it's passed. So it is in effect a two-tier system.
I got a question. Yeah, I'm just trying to wrap my head around this mathematically. It sounds like a great deal if you only get the 5-year average once every 5 years, right? Because realistically, that average should apply it could apply every single year, but you're only getting up every 5 years once.
Right.
Right? And it could be that the 5-year sum applies. We're taking the 5-year average. Right? So it's very different. It's a good deal.
And let me just include one other thing in here. The reason why you go with the current CPI rate for new leases is because you've got no history for the last 5 years. You don't have that history. So you're going forward and smoothing it out over, it's really a look back for the existing leaseholders. And then the new leases will catch up with that system, because then they will start from the inception of their lease. It will be over a 5-year period. Another way to look at it too, it might help to clarify, is if I'm 2 years into my adjustment period and I sell my hangar, then what happens is that new leasing is calculated from the current CPI. It starts all over again with the 25-year lease. Right. So it seems like a two-tiered system, and it sort of is, but it does favor current leaseholders and smoothing things out. Now, I've been fortunate, as opposed to Greg, where I've been hit with most years with like 2-3%. And then Greg came along and got whacked upside the head with a 7 or 8% increase. And I thought, and then I brought it up at that time. I said, that seems really unfair.
No, this seems like a lot fair deal.
Yeah. So anyway.
Well, I mean, the idea is to remove both.
You got
White one water and you do. That's not fair to anybody. I think that's what we're agreeing with here.
So I made a motion to go ahead.
Yeah, we can do this all.
So are we okay with this? Do we have any other questions?
Yeah.
Is this how we submit it to the DOCC?
Lisa's got
I
a
have
question.
something, just to make sure I understand what the motion is, it's to make the motion to set the private ground, commercial ground and non-aeronautical ground rates as determined here at plus the percentage increase on any 5-year or any leases that are up. Is that the motion on the table? Meaning it's the two, not just the one rate?
Okay, the motion would be to adopt a methodology for determining lease increases for current lessees over the 5-year period from the inception of their lease. That's the best way I can describe it.
But is it not also to set the new leasing rate?
No, the new leasee rate is just the current CPI. if I'm
No,
not-
wait, no.
No,
The current leasing rate
on here.
has a baseline that was established in 2018.
Yeah.
And these annual increases have been applied to that baseline every year since.
This
Which is
motion
why
is
you-
about selecting one of the multitude of ways.
Right.
Exactly.
This is picking the one way.
Right.
Each year.
So that's our recommendation to the commissioners. Then if they approve it, then it sets those rates. But we can't approve those rates.
CPI average over 5 years.
Right.
There you go.
You're doing so good. What were you doing?
Not one for one. You touch it.
Okay, the motion before the board is to Ryan. The motion before the board is to adopt a new method of calculating the annual lease increase based on consumer price index as established in all items in west side class B and C, all urban, using a 5-year average.
Rolling average?
5-year average. I don't know. Well, it would be a rolling average, be the most recent 5 years.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Brian?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion is carried.
Okay.
Now, if I understand how this is gonna work, this basically goes into the airport's hands to go up to the VOCC. So the board's involved with this matter is.
Mr. Chairman, when you do your airport update, you'll go over this proposal to the commissioners to the airport.
Moving on to our next item of business, airport viewing stand discussion. Where you go, Jeremy?
Not the picture again? Yeah.
There we go. Okay, anyway, that's what this was presented way back in 2012. It wasn't, there was nothing happened with it. The Coeur d'Alene Airport Association, like I say, have some funds for something like this, but it never got off the ground. And I thought we would propose it again, but we need a location for it. So that would be the discussion tonight, would be probably a location if we go forward.
Harry, the thing on the right with 2 stacks, is that the pilot's lounge?
Correct. And here's the blueprints. So you guys, I'll let you guys look at it. It's just a rough drawing there, so we pass it around to the board members.
So it was open wall, as I recall.
Yeah, it was open wall. Yeah. And
And you move away from the general public now and the airport.
that was the idea of it. But the way it's standing now, it more looks like it's for the pilots. But I think that if we could find a location, then we could let the public come out and look at it and the pilot, so that you have to be a fence there somewhere to separate the two of them. And let the public in, and then for the general public to come in, they would have to have some kind of access to them.
I'm definitely all for some kind of, I envision it as like a public space, somewhere that they don't have to access. I would like to see it, I built something like this very similar at my last airport, and it was literally a 3 acre. It had barbecue pits, campsites, Wi-Fi, like everything, and it was a campsite, it was kind of this too, so you could fly in, tie down, and go Pigeon County Park, it was 8 acre park. And we had a public viewing tower, so the public could access the park as well. The pilots would walk through a fence to get to the public park section, which is right on the other side. So, I'm all for something like that. I think we need something like that. There's plenty of backcountry around here. Pilots just want to camp next to their airplane and move along. So, finding a location for that will definitely, I think it's worth putting together some kind of a committee or something like that to look into this. I don't know if it's something we can decide tonight, but.
Yeah, it is on the spot.
Honestly, somewhere midfield, possibly on the north side, off like a 2-4 run up, kind of up by the North Ramsey. Straight north from there. Yep. Just
Right,
anywhere.
yeah, right there. See where
That
that,
location.
yeah, right where the tower was, the temporary tower, that big.
We kind of have to think if we are going to incorporate a place where you could tie down, park and camp, that's going to be somewhere more like near one of our parking areas. This could be something, I know this sounds kind of far off, but we actually have preliminary talks happening about building a underpass under Delta that would be accessed from the West Ramp area, like right next to the Greg's facility there. Yep, that would
To get to the end.
that would go to the infield. So that the VOR was scheduled to be put out of service by the FAA this month. They have yet to get back to me on whether that's what's happening. They've been out there multiple times throughout the last few days. But if that VOR actually gets decommissioned, it would open up the entire infield, most of it, for development, green space, park area. So essentially, we could have a public access street side, land side of the airport in the middle of the airport that will access through there.
So you don't have to include fencing.
Yeah, essentially there would be a fenced corridor that would go through and you would have a public street side access to the hangars or buildings or green space, however we did it in the middle of the airport. And a viewing tower out there would be awesome. You'd have full 360.
So I do have a question though. So if you provide a corridor to get into here without them getting onto airport property, wouldn't that entail fencing this whole area?
There would be a interior fence.
Okay, but it would be a smaller one
Yeah.
because it would only go for the area that's utilized for that viewing.
Yep.
Okay, I understand.
Or hangars or however we did it. I mean, if we do end up going down the road and doing a grass runway, a turf runway, I mean, there could be hangars that have access directly to the grass, So, I mean, there's a million different things we could do out there. That would be a really cool spot or something like that. That could be a place where you could tie down in the grass or on the ramp or the park right there to camp at or have a fire at or whatever. So,
So I have a question, what options are available for using this space in here? I mean, it's limited.
it's limited. We definitely have, runway safety areas and sight lines and different lines that we will draw to bring in development. But I mean, very roughly, there's at least, based on my preliminary look at it, like a 40 to 80 acre parcel of land that you could build on out there that would remain clear of those surfaces.
I guess my follow-up question to that would be, is it possible to put actual hangars out there?
Yes, that's what we're looking at.
Okay, so, because you mentioned just grass tie-down area.
Right. Yeah.
But you're
I'm
looking
looking
at
at for
actual hangars. out
buildings. Yeah. We can do access off of Delta for aviation.
But you know what, Gas was talking about, I don't know if anybody here has been to the airport in New Holston, Wisconsin. It's on the other side of the lake from Oshkosh, and the Super Cub organization, about 10, 15 years ago, through their members, raised funds and actually built the pavilion on the airport. And the interesting thing about the airport, it's where, I can't remember the name of the lawnmower, but Coons or somebody had a factory there. And they actually use the airport grounds to go out and test their lawnmowers. So they have acres and acres of beautiful green grass and plenty of people come in and take off that grass. But the organization itself built the pavilion very similar to that and use it every year for the client. Otherwise, it's there for the community to enjoy, which everyone comes out there and gets.
So where's the high point on this airport?
Top of it. Yep.
Up here? Okay, where they had the temporary tower.
So the other item that that would be, whether we wanted to have the public access the airport or put the campground and everything outside of the, so the airport, the pilots would access the private area, so to speak.
Yeah, they could be two totally separate things.
Yeah.
The public viewing area versus a park or green space. I think it's kind of I don't know if you've seen the videos of Mike Patey down in Spanish Fork. He's doing a pretty interesting development down there that's really bringing the community out to the airport. He's putting in a large green space, park area, fire pits, a place for the public to come essentially hang out at the airport and be involved with the airport and kind of intermix into that while being on the land site. So I think it's pretty important to give the public a place to, I mean, obviously a place for kids to come hang on the fence and watch airplanes.
Yeah. I think being in the center of the airport
That'd be awesome.
Really.
So, I mean, timeline on that, that's what we're working through when we start looking at the master plan, how that looks, that would be a really serious project, so.
I have another question. Is that something that the FAA would afford funds to?
It depends, if it opens up a lot of ground for development and furthering the airport as far as private development, then they something to consider.
Which component were you questioning the AIP eligibility of?
Oh, just the fact that if they were going to develop this inside area for some public usage, would the FAA provide funding for that?
I see. So, like the taxiways and taxi lanes, yes. There's potential for one access roadway, but we've been reserving that for the north side of the airport with typically that would go into a terminal facility and not into like a development area. But there is certainly a possibility of that. As far as developing like, a landscaped park, absolutely. They would shy away from
With the fencing?
But there's potential for fencing, yes. Typically what they're focused on is the exterior fencing, the perimeter, and wildlife. But there's also, if you have a public side there, there's potential depending on how we present it.
It's essentially the public protection side of your operations that we have.
So the reason for my question is just to find out how much the airport association would, or the public would want to come up with as far as helping to develop that area for public usage.
Brian's got a question.
Are there examples of this kind of thing at other airports that would help us to envision what this is and a template?
Definitely. We can do another presentation.
Go right watching.
Bozeman.
The one that's International Airport, they have a camping area on it for people who come in with their airplanes and camp. New Holstein, Wisconsin, I mentioned, it's had a pavilion built by one of the aviation organizations that uses the airfield every year.
Yeah, the one I built, like I said, I did about a 5-acre park at Mile Airport. And it was largely funded by donations. We had a big sod farm there. They did all the sod irrigation and the trees. Or maintained it. And the Pilots Association there built all the pergolas, and barbecue pits. Yeah, it was a pretty cool project.
So the airport association would be involved with this as far as fundraising.
Yeah, we know what, if we have something concrete that we can throw some money at, then it's a lot easier to raise money for that than it is just to say, oh, well, we're going to build a pavilion. Well, there it is. It's been sitting there for 10 years, 12 years, or longer.
Did we consider putting together some committee, say, in coordination with the airport and airport association? Try and put a pen to paper on this and see what we can come up with.
That's a good idea.
Any volunteers?
Could I make, we would probably have to have a location. And do we need to do the master plan first before we do the location, or can we tie that into it?
We can tie that in with it, but I think that would be one of the task of the subcommittee.
Right, it's finding a location.
Yeah.
What would go with it now? That's, I mean, it's just kind of a Christmas wish list. But certainly, there are a lot of things that need to be considered, a lot of elements to it. You already got, really, you've already got the plans, just a question where to put it, how to develop it. What direction. So with, in conjunction with the airport, and the airport association. With the approach.
Well, so I make a motion that we form a sub.
Mr. Chairman, I don't need to be a stickler for rules, but it is a discussion only, so my suggestion was bring it forward in the next meeting.
Very good.
Did you want
Yeah, I'm gonna go.
to? And I don't really want to interject my first meeting.
That's okay, go right ahead.
Did you want to get Aaron's comment, question?
Yep.